Hey guys, welcome to the third video in my TBR completion project. If this is the first time you watch one of these videos, what I do is I'm going to react to a previous TBR from earlier this year, and whatever books that I did not read on that TBR will be read in the second half of this video, which will be a reading vlog. So if you haven't watched these videos, I've made a playlist and I'll leave that playlist linked in the description box for you to check out. So, April. My memory has pretty positive vibes from my April TBR. Let's just get straight into it. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books I'm planning to read in April. So I'm going to be reading Infinity Blade Book 1, Awakening. I read this. I'm pretty sure the sequel is also on this TBR, and I also read the sequel. That I have to read a book that's under 150 pages. So I'm going to be reading the sequel. It's about 130 pages. So I knew the sequel was in here. So yeah, like I said, I've read that as well. First two books completed. This I have to read a book that has a white cover, and I've selected Trader's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. I read that. We are going so strong here. So happy. Also, I really didn't like that book. I think I gave it 1 star. And for this, you have to read a book that is set on the sea or set at the coast. And for this, I've selected Throne of Jade by Naomi Novik. This is the second book in... I never read that. I don't know how I feel about this. So, Throne of Jade is the second book in Naomi Novik's Temeraire series, which is set in the Napoleon War period, and we have dragons, and we basically follow this man who has a dragon called Temeraire. I thought the first book was alright, like I didn't love it. In fact, I kind of feel like I need to reread the first book to fully follow and appreciate book 2. Okay. I have to read a book or a series that includes a character that shapeshifts. Now, I've selected Earthsea. Okay, so this book is a bind-up of 4 books, and I did read the first book in this bind-up, and that was the only book that was on my TBR for April. I have a feeling this is on another TBR, because there was a read-along for this series at the beginning of the year, but I didn't finish book 2 in the bind-up. I think I started it. So I don't know where this falls. I guess it's like currently reading. If there isn't any other books on this TBR, I might read this week, just because I don't want it to show up on a future TBR when there's a lot of books. I don't know how I'm feeling about this TBR. I will try and find a prompt to fit the book Empire of Dreams. I read this book. It was the last book in the read-along I hosted at the beginning of the year, so it was a mandatory read. It was read. We're good. Okay, mixed feelings right now, because on the one hand, I'm really happy that my intuition was right and I was really good with my April TBR and read a lot of the books from that TBR. But the books I did not read, I don't know how I feel about, because I'm not entirely sure that my interest is fully in them anymore. I think what I'll do is I'll try and give both of these books a go. There's a real possibility I could DNF these, and if that does happen, I'm just going to read books this week from my top 20 books of 2020 to read, because that list is still pretty long and I want to get to them. So we'll see how this week goes. Anyway, weird feeling, because like I'm successful, but then I'm also not super excited about these books like I have been the other books. I'm sure it's going to be interesting. I'm going to leave this here. You will see me next when I start reading the books, which will be in a day or so, because it's currently Friday and I don't plan to start this vlog until Sunday or Monday. Hey guys, so it's Monday. Another week, another vlog. If I seem a little off or weird, it's just because I'm super tired right now. But let's talk about my reading plans for the week. These are the books that I've got to read for my April TBR. I'm thinking I might grab the audiobook just to help me with this and just read along while listening to the audiobook, because this is kind of dense from what I remember, and I'm a little bit intimidated and I don't want to try and read it and have it take up all my time when I have so many books I want to get to. Now these two, Temeraire is technically not on the TBR, but I want to try and reread it because it's been over a year since I've read this. I think I read it for the reading rush last year, so it's been quite a while and I need to like try and refresh, and then I'll get to the sequel Throne of Jade. So these two are from my top 20 books to read in 2020. But when I was editing my last vlog, I figured out that it's not a top 20 books of 2020 to read, it's a top 19. I don't know how, but I didn't do 20 books. I even went back and rewatched that video to double check, and I only put 19 books on that list. I don't know how I made that mistake, but I'm so thankful to my past self for making that mistake. Like, now I feel like way more optimistic about actually completing that TBR video or list. So anyway, I thought I would include that here, like in case someone starts counting and tells me. But I did actually make a start on A Man Called Uwe. I picked up the audiobook yesterday, started listening to it, and I'm currently 163 pages into this. This follows a 59-year-old man called Uwe, and he is dealing with grief. He's lost his wife, who he was so close to. He doesn't really have a whole lot of friends, he doesn't really have family, so he really relied on her. He's also sort of questioning if he should keep living. That's obviously a really gloomy story, and the story definitely is that, but it's also kind of got this lighthearted funny side to it, I would say, because we're also seeing him interact with these new neighbors that have moved in, and these neighbors have these young kids, and they just keep coming over, and the mother or wife keeps dropping over food and interacting with him, and he's just like, leave me alone, I don't want anyone around. He is starting to sort of form a relationship with them, but he's just like such a judgmental old man. He's one of those old people that like doesn't know how to use technology, thinks things have to be done or said in a certain way, is very traditional in his thinking, and I think that's what I'm not loving about it, because he's just so stereotypical of an old man that I'm just kind of like, okay, that's it. And I feel really bad for saying that, because I know this book is so beloved. I don't really see it so often on BookTube, but I know outside of BookTube I feel like this book is so well loved, and I'm just kind of like, it's not bad, but I don't think it's absolutely incredible. I do want to read this author's other book, what's it called, My Grandmother Sends Her Regards or something like that. That one sounds really interesting to me, but so far I'm like pretty average on this, to be completely honest. I'm hopeful I'll finish this probably tomorrow. It's evening now, so, and then I really want to start Pachinko. I said I wanted to start this last week. This week I'm going to make it happen, especially since I found out it is the Subtle Asian Book Club pick for this month, November. So I would love to read this and hopefully be able to watch the live show. So yeah, those are the plans. I may even try to start one of the non-fiction books that is on my top 20, that is really my top 19 books of 2020 to read. I'm really excited for Pachinko. I think that's the one I'm most looking forward to. Yeah. It's been a couple of days, so I have a few updates. First of all, I finished A Man Called Uwe. I don't think this book was for me, ultimately. I do talk about this a fair bit on my channel, that I really enjoy stories that are unpredictable. And this was exactly what I expected, which isn't a bad thing, but it does impact my enjoyment and how I personally value the book. This book is basically up, minus the flying house, minus the talking dog. This is basically up. I'm giving it 2.5 stars. That is exactly an average rating for me, but I'm glad I finally got to it because I've owned this for quite a while, so it was about time. I'm also really glad because now we have another book ticked off my top 20 that is really my top 19 books of 2020 to read. And speaking of that list, I decided to pick up another book from that list. Since I was listening to the audiobook of this, I decided to pick up the audiobook of Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. I've only just made a start on that one. So far I'm really enjoying the audiobook because it is narrated by the author, and it's him telling his story and experience working as a lawyer in the late 1980s. And he worked in Alabama, he had his office there. He was a lawyer for criminals who were convicted and punished with capital punishment. So this is not an easy read. So I'm going to take this slow, I think, and try and finish it by the end of the weekend so I can give you my final thoughts. Now, in terms of the mandatory reads this week, I'm not going to lie, I have kind of been putting them off. But these two, I've almost finished Temeraire. I have that much left of Temeraire. I don't want to call this boring, but it's kind of boring. Start off and we're following this captain called Will Lawrence, and he is an Englishman. Him and his fleet, not fleet, but his boat, I don't know naval terminology, but he's a naval captain, and they've just had a battle with some French boat people, naval people on the sea, and he goes onto the French ship and they, you know, taking all their supplies, and he comes across a dragon egg there. This dragon egg hatches, and the dragon is sort of then bonded to Will Lawrence. So Will Lawrence calls the dragon Temeraire, and then because they are bonded, Will becomes Temeraire's aviator, which is basically like a dragon trainer, rider. That means the two of them have to go with all the other aviators and sort of train and learn how to like fly in dragon formation and how to use their dragons for battles against the French. Will has to sort of deal with this new status, because if you are an aviator, you're sort of no longer classified as a gentleman, and it means like you can't inherit your family's estate, you can't inherit certain titles, because your life has to be dedicated to being an aviator now. Actually, now thinking about it, I think part of my issue is like the lack of plot and the lack of sense of direction. I do find it important to know or have a good sense of what the characters' goals are from pretty early on in the story. That is something I find keeps me really engaged. There are variations with how this can be done, but I think in particular with fantasy stories, especially fantasy stories that are series, I want to know like what the characters' goals are. I think that tells you a lot about their character. I guess their goal in here is for Will and Temeraire to be good partners, which is fine, but it's not a goal that's moving the plot along. And now in terms of Sea, I've made a start and read the first 3 chapters of the Tombs of Atawan. Why did I say that like that? Anyway, we start off with following this young girl who is taken away from her family as an 8-year-old child, and she's now a little bit older, but she's been raised in this temple to be a priestess, and she was chosen because she was born the day that the last priestess died. So now she's got a new name, she's got a new role in life, and we just met some of the people who were in the temple with her and her sort of role. Archie, do you want to come say hello? Archie, come here. Oh, Papa, come here. Okay, say hello. Say hello. Look at the camera. Do you hear him groaning? He makes all these like moans and groans, and that's how he talks. You don't bark, do you? You just moan and groan. Someone on my last vlog commented they were trying to figure out if there was a dog in the background, and he's always with me when I film. He's either on my lap or beside me or in the background. I just thought I'd bring him to the front of the camera so you can see him, but he doesn't really like the camera, do you? You're a bit camera shy. That's okay. Anyway. So it's Friday afternoon. I just reacted to my May TBR. So the unread books from that TBR are going to be read next week. Spoiler alert for that reaction, Pachinko was on it. So I did start reading the first chapter of this. I think I'm going to try and finish this just to make me completing next week's unread books more of a possibility than it seems right now. I finished Temeraire. My final rating for this book's going to be 2.25 stars. I think for a book that's the first book in a 9-book long series, there really wasn't enough world building and story plot setup. I mean, the main setup of this story is Temeraire being a really rare dragon, and a dragon that's sought out by other countries. So in here he's sought out by the French, and just Lawrence trying to keep him in his possession and then them training. And Lawrence is one of those characters who's just so honorable, so by the books, that he's kind of boring and predictable. I hate saying I felt meh about a book, but that's exactly what I felt about this one. So I'm very curious to see what Throne of Jade, the second book in this series, has in store, because I honestly have no clue as to the direction the story will take. I finished the second book, The Tombs of Atawan, and I really enjoyed it. I think I'm going to give it about a 4 stars. I like this book because the main character from the first book in this bind-up, he did make an appearance in this, and it feels like this book is more a collection of short stories, especially since the second book was really quite short. If you don't know, the way the Earthsea books are kind of set out is there's this place called the Earthsea, and if you can see that, it's just all these islands, and I believe each book takes place on a different sort of island, and you eventually like make your way around through not all of the islands but quite a few. I really like how all the different islands have different like cultures and languages and different sorts of magics and beliefs. I just think it's really fun. There's not a whole lot that happens in this book, but I think for a book that's so short and that does really feel like a short story, that it's good. I think if someone wants a lot more to happen in the story, they might be kind of disappointed. We basically just follow this girl who's been raised in this temple to be this priestess, priestess. She's really secluded from normal civilization. Everyone in the temple is pretty much women. There's this labyrinth maze underground. It's supposed to hold a lot of secrets and mystery and magic. So that's all you kind of really know, and all I feel like I can tell you. Like I said, the story's so short, so I feel like if I said anything else, you would know the entire story. I swear I always have so many books to read at last minute, and I don't intend to leave them all to the last minute, yet here we are again. First of all, actually, I should talk about Just Mercy, the audiobook I was listening to, because I did finish that. So this book follows Bryan Stevenson from the late 1980s when he first set up his law office. His goal was to be an attorney for those who can't afford attorneys, to mostly work for those on death row. This book was a very, very difficult read, but such an important one. A lot of the people who he helped and worked for were these people who needed help. One guy whose case he took quite early on was a war veteran. He fought in Vietnam and he was suffering greatly from PTSD, and he was sentenced to death because he did make a bomb and that bomb exploded and killed a girl. But what really should have happened is he should have given care for his PTSD, whereas instead they just locked him up for years, because this is what happened. These people get sentenced to death and they get locked up for years and years and years, and they're literally just waiting to die, and he got killed by the electric chair. So many of the cases that the author Bryan Stevenson talked about were like him, these people that needed help. There were quite a few cases that he talked about in here where these teenagers or even like preteens committed crimes and they were charged with adult charges because the judge just didn't see them fit for society, basically, and just thought, you know, we'll throw them away, lock them away for years. Just be warned, there are so many trigger warnings for this, like literally trigger warning for everything in this: death, murder, racism, physical and sexual assault, trigger warnings for animal abuse. It's a really detailed look at the harshness and the cruelty of what has happened and what still happens in the criminal justice system in America. But moving on to my remaining 3 books. I don't know how I'm gonna finish these. I decided to pick up the audiobook for Throne of Jade. I'm pretty positive I'll finish this by tomorrow night. So Pachinko, I've made a really good chunk of the way through. I'm 272 pages in. Now, this book starts off in Korea and we follow a mum and a daughter who run this boarding house, and the daughter ends up getting pregnant out of wedlock, but then she gets married to a man who was staying in the boarding house, who is not the father of the child, but he got really sick and her mother cared for him, and so he feels like he's in debt to them, and so to repay his so-called debt, he offers to take the girl's hand in marriage. Then he and the girl move over to Osaka in Japan because that's where his older brother lives with his wife, and then they kind of all live together as a family in a home. That's all I really want to say, because that's like the first 100 pages of the book, and I don't like to say much about the plot beyond page 100. I'm really liking this. I like reading this because we have the conflict about Japan and Korea. There's also mentions of what's happening in China. There was like a reference to the comfort houses, which was basically these like boarding houses of women who were forced into prostitution to comfort the Japanese military soldiers. I'm actually also in the middle of currently reading The Rape of Nanking, which I'm not reading from one of these vlogs, and they talk about all that in that book. So it's interesting reading The Rape of Nanking at the same time of reading this book, because there are references, since all the conflict does kind of line up and intertwine like a web. I'm still really loving this. I like the writing, really liking learning about this time period. So it's Monday now. So I'm actually refilming the final clip and the final update in this video. The original footage wasn't great because I filmed it in the middle of a storm. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this. Oh my god, do you hear that? So that footage was in the original video, and then I went to go upload the video last night and I literally had every single possible technical difficulty you could imagine. I had trouble exporting the video, I had trouble uploading the video, and then the cherry on top was I got a copyright claim, so I had to edit some things out. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna refilm this final clip so you don't have to deal with the terrible thunderstorm. So I did complete Throne of Jade. I am giving this book 2 stars. Most of this book is Will Lawrence and his dragon tamer traveling to China, and then they visit China and learn about how the Chinese raise and treat their dragons, because it's done in a way that's quite different to how the English do so. And it was sort of cool because we did get to see different dragon species in China. I did look up the synopsis of the next book in this series, which I think is called The Black Black Powder War, and that is about them traveling to Istanbul. So what I can gather is each book in this series, they do travel to some part of the world, and then we do look at that country in that historical setting. I sort of identified why I don't think I've fallen in love with this series or the world, because I was really expecting to fall in love with the world. I think it's because these books are more historical fiction than they are fantasy. I think the main reason though that I didn't love it was I just don't like the character Will Lawrence. I've talked quite a bit recently about Delana from the Stormlight Archive books and how I really don't like his character, and Will Lawrence reminded me in a lot of ways of Delana, except he's not as creepy as I find Delana to be. He's one of those really self-righteous characters that just thinks he knows better and he's always doing well and doing right and just puts himself on a pedestal, and I really hate those characters. I think they're like my least favorite character stereotype of all time. It goes without saying I won't be continuing this series, unfortunately. There was not enough in these first two books that made me invested. I'm really disappointed, but we shall move on. In happier news, I also finished Pachinko and I really enjoyed this one. I'm giving it either 3.75 or 4 stars. I did give it 4 stars on Goodreads. I think my favorite thing about this book was the scope, because we did get to see how what Japan did to Korea impacted a family in multiple generations and in multiple different ways. There was so much in here that I also learned, so it was really interesting and heartbreaking, and I really want to go away and learn more about this time period and from the perspective of Asia, because I know a little bit but nowhere near enough. So I'm really glad I finally got around to reading this, and it's great because that is the third book that I've read in this video. I get to tick off from my top 20, that is really my top 19 books of 2022 read, so I feel like I've accomplished a lot this week. I also completed The Furthest Shore, which is book 3 in the OFC series. I enjoyed this. I think I'm going to give it a 3.25 stars. It's weird because I do think objectively this third book is the best book so far, and I do think most people would prefer the third book out of the first 3 books, but for some reason I really liked book 2. I think I just really vibed with the setting. This book follows a prince who goes to this magic school, which is the same magic school that is actually in book 1, and I can remember when I first read book 1 I was so excited to read about a magic school. It was literally there for like 3 pages and then we moved on to other places, and the same thing happened here, which was a little disappointing, but it didn't impact my reading or anything. Prince goes to this magic school. He then gets this quest to go and uncover and solve why magic is disappearing or dying from the world, so he goes with the High Archmage to complete this quest. So they travel across the UFC to do their thing. Also, the main character from the first book is also in this third book, so it was really cool to see him make an appearance. He's a lot older now, and I do really like how many references there were in this book to the previous books. All the references are a bit like a puzzle piece that you put together, so I find that quite fun, and I really enjoyed this. But I didn't read the last book in this bind-up, so I'm going to use this as a save this week, and I will finish the final book in this bind-up next week. So you will hear my final thoughts on this entire bind-up and this last book in my next vlog. That is it for this week. If you've made it this far and you enjoyed this video, please leave me a dragon, one of the dragon emojis, in the comments, because there are dragons in both these books, so I think that is quite fitting. And I really hope that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!